about $600 billion cut in defense after the $350 billion that's already been cut over 10 years. That's around $60 billion a year. That's going to start cutting into some of the muscle. That's just not fat. And that was designed that way to really encourage the super committee to get its work done and to get at least $1.2 trillion. But do you know, Steve, there are 44 of us who have stood up and said, we want the super committee to go big. We want it to go $4 trillion plus deficit reduction over 10 years. Now, you can't do that just with spending cuts. You got to make some major reforms in entitlements. You've got to do major reforms in the income tax. And some of those reforms in the income tax, getting rid of inefficient tax preferences, which are special interest tax breaks.
Loopholes is what they're called.
Tax loopholes, you said it. You know, when you get rid of those, it produces revenue. And when it produces revenue, you can use part of that revenue to actually simplify the tax code and lower the tax rates for everybody, as well as corporate tax rates.
And of course, Senator, those loopholes are there precisely because of their very powerful interest in lobbies that help put them there.
But they've gotten out of control. We had about $2 trillion of those tax loopholes when we passed the 1986 tax reform law. That has grown to $14 trillion over a 10-year period. There is more going out in these tax loopholes than there is coming in the individual income tax. So there's desperate cries for tax reform, and that, because of making the tax system so much simpler, so much more efficient, it'll crank up the engine. And as a result of the economic engine, you're going to get more revenue. But you know, there are people that say, oh, I'm not going to vote for anything that's got a tax that's going to increase more revenue, even in an income tax reform. So that's where you've got to break through and get people of goodwill to come together. Now,
I've got to ask you this,
yes,
though.
sir.
People of goodwill coming together.
Every senator I know is a good person. They just got to get out of their ideological and partisan boxes.